Hello again. Today's walk will be at Miquin Woods. It's a cloudy, foggy morning. We'll be walking a little bit of the blue, red, and yellow trail today. We won't do the full potential. So again, there will always be that element for you to come back and visit on your own. Probably will take about 2 hours again, just because of the wrapping around on the trail system that I'm going to be doing. But let's see what we can find today. Okay, I've laid my keys next to the size of the scat to give you a size reference. As you can see, it's very large. The scat is composed of many seed particles. If you haven't figured out by now, this is black bear scat. One of the largest masses that you will find in the forest. Often the roundness of the size of a Twinkie is often what I've heard. But again, large mass full of seeds leaves no doubt that this is black bear in the park. Okay, another bird call calling, a downward flute-like spiraling sound. It's a thrush related to a robin. This one here is actually called the veery. It likes the dense habitat, skulks in it, so it's kind of hard to see, but the song is a clear giveaway. Again, this is the veery, which is a member of the thrush. I know I mentioned grapevine back on the Jugtown walk, but this is a young vine. You're probably maybe familiar with it, but this one here is just showing off classic methods of how they climb. The tendrils that they use to wrap around branches and pull the vine up into the tree are clearly evident in this young vine. Again, right in here. Just showing you the mechanism of how the vines initially get up into the tree. The young vines do all the work, and as they mature, they develop the thick peeling bark that we know of the mature grapevine. Okay, along the red trail, I've been seeing a lot of this shrub with the white flower. May make you think Japanese honeysuckle, but it's more of a shrub. Honeysuckle is the family, but this is Tartarin honeysuckle, another invasive that's inundating into the understory. A little scenic spot along the creek that runs through Miquin Woods. This is the Spruce Run. The headwaters are up at Crystal Springs. It's a nice area of lush vegetation, rambling creeks, or rambling water over the stones, through the heart of Miquin Woods. For the record, when you call it the Spruce Run, you don't need to add creek. Run is another term that means creek. So Spruce Run is the proper name for this water body. One of the things I like about Miquin is it's much more of a healthier stand. I'm not saying it doesn't have its problems, but it is a place where you can find native trees still growing from the understory. This one here is a little white oak tree. White oaks are identified by the rounded lobes that they have. The red oak family has like a little needle-like. Over here is a young tulip tree. Again, in the Jugtown walk, I mentioned, I believe, the tulip trees, the king's trees, and this is what a young little sapling looks like of that species. Both of these trees are probably only about 2-3 years old. Waiting for an opportunity to put some height onto them, and then if chance presents, as an understory tree, they would try to reach up into the understory. A young beech is right here. So there's a mixture. But if you've been paying attention to the background, there are some invasives in the area. Japanese barberry. Got the thorns that people know, break a stem, it's sort of a yellowish in color. And then right in here, this little guy, unfortunately, is multiflora rose. So there are invasives penetrating, and in time, they will dominate the understory, because here's a larger barberry, and this would prevent the young saplings, the trees that we want, to grow up. I'm on the bridge heading to the Yellow Trail. Just wanted to give you another shot of the Spruce Run. As you can see, it's still rambling over the stones. A couple little stone arcs, ledges, whatever you want to call them, exist. Just a beautiful scenic spot in the park. Okay, this is the Yellow Trail, trailhead off the service road. It's a little bit more of a moderate hike than the other side of the park. The other side was pretty much old camp roads, which I'll explain in a little bit at another point. But this is a more rugged trail, a little bit of an incline to it, a little bit rocky, but not overly difficult. Okay, just started the Yellow Trail. There's some nice ferns at the beginning, just coming up. This delicate one that I'm looking at right now, I believe is marginal wood fern. Unlike Christmas fern, it's not an evergreen. Many ferns die back for the winter season, put out their fronds to collect their sunlight. Most of these ferns are actually all one plant. Ferns grow from a rhizome, which is an underground root structure that sends out many runners. When they hit the surface, those turn into the fronds we see. So if you are doing a little bit of bushwhacking, you never want to cut through a fern bed, because you'll be crushing the roots of the plant and will be doing it harm. Okay, I've hit a different fern bed. This one here, I believe, is called New York fern. It's different than the marginal wood fern. As you can see, it tapers to a tip, but if you look down here on the bottom of the stem, or the frond I should say, it also comes to a taper. This is a characteristic, from what I remember, of what is called New York fern. Also a deciduous fern. It will die back, but again, nice rich soil out here in Miquin, and a couple of different ferns are well established in the park. You might even find some other ones, the bracken, rattlesnake, of course Christmas fern is around. So there is a lush understory here in the park. It looks like the Yellow Trail is going to become a fern walk. This one in front of me is maidenhair fern. May not look like your typical fern, but it has these black stems, and on the leaf, or the lips of the frond, one of them is sort of serrated. To me, it looks like insect wings. But again, this is maidenhair fern. Okay, I freely admit this is one of the reasons people hike the Yellow Trail. This is the rock outcrop at the far bend of it. As I know as much fun it is to explore and walk on the rocks, I do ask you to consider your actions because it can be a little dangerous. But also remember, you're the visitor in the park, and these rock outcrops are home to many wild animals. Beyond the chipmunks, snakes, other animals will be using them. There are some vegetation hidden in amongst or growing on the rocks, the algae and the lichen. So just remember, when you do move on rocks, you are affecting the wildlife and flora around you. Okay, this is a large millipede. It's a decomposer with 4 legs per body part, eating vegetative matter and other organics and turning it back into soil. I find them in the more rockier parks, Muskie, Miquin, Point Mountain, under stones and logs. But again, these do also serve as a food source for many of the smaller mammals, chipmunks, squirrels, and of course some of the other predators that we may find, the birds and the snakes. So again, take care and pay attention to the ground, and you might find one of these on one of your walks. This is a different salamander than the one from the Sarrowlands walk. This is slimy salamander, a black salamander with white spots. As its name implies, it has the ability to secrete a fluid over its body that acts like sort of a slimy glue. If I picked it up, it would stick to my hands. It's a defense mechanism. So if a predator tried to eat it and it secreted the solution, it would gum up the predator's mouth and learn not to eat this type of salamander. Like most of our other salamanders, it is a lungless salamander, and I do discourage picking up salamanders because the oils on our hands would fill their pores and block them, and then they would not be able to breathe. There's nothing to see. I'm doing this only because of what just occurred. But one of the things that you need to remember is with some of our mammals, they leave odors behind. I just picked up a waft of red fox in the area. It's hard to describe. It's just a little bit of an obnoxious odor, and I just sort of happened to walk into it. So again, remember, when you go on your walks, it's more than just a visual walk for your eyes. Your other senses come into play as well. As mentioned, the Yellow Trail is turned into a little bit of a fern walk. If I'm identifying this one correctly, this is cinnamon fern. It gets its name not because it smells like cinnamon, but down in the base of the stem, if it's coming through, there's sort of these hair-like follicles that will be future fronds or the elements of the fronds, and they're cinnamon in color, and that's where the name comes from. There's another young one still in a fiddlehead, just emerged, actually 2. So again, sometimes close inspection of the stem and the frond is needed to do the correct identification. This is the pond at Miquin Woods. It's about a 2-acre pond, if I recall the size correctly. Pretty deep. I know it has sunfish and bass. It is a catch and release pond. If you wish to come here, it is fishing is allowed under catch and release with a proper license. But I will warn you, it's probably about a half-mile walk or more from the parking lot. Okay, this mass of sticks at the end of the pond is not natural. It was made by beaver. I'm not going to go into any real detail on beaver because I know my colleague has a proper video up on beaver. But I'll just say that the pond here at Miquin Woods, as well as the creek nearby, have historically had beaver in the past. I'm not truly seeing any current evidence of beaver being around, but it is always a place to look for the potential of a sighting for beaver. Okay, down in the water, hopefully you can see it, but there is the head of a bullfrog sticking up. It's our largest native frog. Makes that hum hum sound, which we somehow translate into juggarum. The bullfrog has been introduced around the country in areas where it's not native, and has had effects on the local amphibian populations. But again, it is native to New Jersey. If you get a good enough look, you can actually tell gender by looking at the ear tympana, the circle behind the eye. If it's about the same size as the eye, it's female. If it's much larger than the eye, it's a male. And they are still sort of setting up territory for breeding. Bullfrog is actually one of the frogs to breed last. The other call you just heard, I believe, is actually a green frog. And the other thing I did spook while I was waiting for the bullfrog to reemerge was a northern water snake. So be aware that all things are now active in the environment. Okay, this is the old ranger house. It dates back 100 plus years, I'm told. Prior to being Miquin Woods, people might know the history that this was going to be a development. Before that, it was the old Camp Watchung with the Boy Scouts. The caretaker for the camp lived here. Any of the other structures that you do find in the park do date from that period. I do know of 2 pavilions, an old lean-to site from the camping days. It was Somerset County that came here. It was not the local Hunterdon Council. But again, it still offered many outdoor and nature activities for the youth in its operation. And now that it's a preserve again, that tradition kind of continues. Okay, just jumped in front of me in the picture is an American toad, one of our amphibians, not as tied to water as the frog species. American toads only need water to actually lay the eggs in and develop as tadpoles, so they typically only use a vernal pool, much like the salamanders. When they call, it sounds more like a bird's trill. It's recognized as an American toad from a look-alike called Fowler's toad by the number of warts per spots. American toad traditionally only has one wart per spot, sometimes 2. Fowler's will have typically 3 or more warts per spot. The other way to identify them is by the parotoid gland, the large bump behind the eye. On American toad, it sits back from the eye, connected by a small little spur. Fowler's toad has it right up to the eye. These are actually poison sacs. They can secrete a solution through the gland that would cause a burning sensation in the predator. And then the predator learns not to eat these guys. Also, when they make their sound, and this is true of frogs as well, they actually do it through an air sac or inflate their throat, but then make the sound by blowing the air out through their nose. Hopefully another song of a bird that I'm going after. Not that. That call that just went, not the call behind me. If you can hear it again over the other one, it sort of sounds like fire, fire, where, here, see it. And that would be the call of the indigo bunting. See if I can get one more call out of it. Okay, it just went again, and that's the call of a bright blue bird called the indigo bunting. Another breeder for our summer.